All right, I think we're about to get started. We confirmed today the thing that if you haven't used enough duct tape, you haven't, well, if things doesn't work, you haven't used enough duct tape. So this piece of art, this is going to be there for now. And then after a while, you'll actually see what's going on there. So today we want to talk a little bit about microservices and also about IoT. So we kind of, the idea of the talk is to show you the features of Microprofile. And yeah, that's a little bit better.
Yeah, sorry about
it's
that.
enough bright lights in our eyes to begin with. Okay. So we wanted to show you the features of Microprofile, and then we needed to find some kind of good examples to do that. And the idea was to do something with the lights and to do something with IoT. So that's what's going to be happening. So before we go any further, I guess we'll say hi. I guess if that's the right spelling. That's not us, but you have us here in front. So my name is Rustam. This is, I think, my 4th year at Riga Dev Days, coming back every year, and it's really, really fun to be here every year. And I work in a Norwegian company called Kompetas. I live in Oslo. I work there. I work together with a colleague of mine, Mats, that will tell a few words about himself in a second. And when I don't do the regular work thing, I'm also quite heavily involved with the Norwegian Java user group. I'm leading the quite big conference called Java Zone as well. So,
Yeah.
Mats.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Mats. I work along with Rustam in Kompetas as tech lead developer, developing software. Having quite fun with that. Well, I really like Java. And looking forward to talking to you about Microprofile, which we'll come into in a second.
Yes. So the idea was like that's a picture of us. That's for sure. But well, the idea was to find those cool examples to show the features of Microprofile, and we were there and thinking like, what can we do? And then we realized, I mean, the whole journey, kind of the whole thing, started about a year ago, and what we realized that in a year ago, so we moved a half a year ago. So around half a year from that point when we started looking for that things, we were about to move. So our offices were going to another place. So then we thought, well, I mean, new office, then we can do some cool stuff. So we can do some new lights and can do some things with lights. Because, well, it's supposed to be super fancy office with all the smart things and everything. But then, well, the lights were not really smart. So then we're like, okay, let's do something about that. And the idea was, so basically you create a tiny little system that takes in some kind of parameters in, so anything like temperature, weather, things, different things, if there's sun outside or not. And then it outputs something out. And well, in our case, it would be some kind of color of the lamps, right?
Yeah, color and brightness. Yeah.
And brightness, because, well, if it's cloudy and cold, and so you want a bit more warmer and brighter lights inside. And if it's sunny outside, you don't really need to have that, all those kind of things, right? So, yeah, and then what happened was that, I mean, we work with enterprise stuff. I mean, I've been working with Java for many, many, many years, and mostly on like enterprise things, and Mats was as well. Yeah. So then what happened is, well, first coffee happened, and then enterprise developers happened. And then we ended up over-engineering the whole thing because, well, I mean, it has to be enterprise into IoT lights, right? A quick show of hands. I can barely see you guys, but it's... how many of you have used Microprofile, heard of Microprofile? Okay, good.
A couple of you, yeah.
How many of you have used it? Okay, good. It's even less. Well, that's good. Then it's a very few that have heard about it, and I think I saw 1 or 2 hands that have used that. Cool. We're going to show you a bit about that. So you're in the right place.
Yeah.
I guess should we show architecture first?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah,
perhaps.
let's do that.
Yeah.
So architecture.
Yeah.
The fantastic, amazing enterprise architecture of controlling the lights.
Yeah, and this is quite as we said, we are engineers, so we're over engineering things to show like a proof of concept, and that's what you can see on the screen here. It's like you got up there you can see the lights, like actually these physical lights, and we talk to them through the light control service, which acts as like in domain-driven design you have this concept of anti-corruption layer, or like separation of concern or whatever you want to call it, so that these lamps they're an SDK for them, which you don't want to play around with because it's quite, heavy, complex. So we created our own API in order to control the lights. So that's the light control service, which actually does the interaction with the light bulbs. And then we have the gateway service, which has the logic, and like tells the lamps, okay, you should know how this color, and which also contacts the other services, the time service and the weather service. The time service, well, that's totally over-engineering because that tells us the current time. That's really separation of concerns taken to the extreme, right?
But it's highly configurable. You can actually define time zones, so it will give you correct time, Perfect. There's lots of features. So you have time zone and weather service are quite simple stuff, right? One of them will give you time for your time zone. The other one will give you weather in degrees, like Celsius degrees. It will do some parsing of XML and magic from weather service and just show it to you. Yeah. Return it as JSON. The gateway is the brains. So everything that's the box where all the inputs come in and some outputs will go out. And that's pretty much. And the boxes in gray, they are not developed yet, so we're kind of playing around and working and making things work. But the main things are there and they kind of work.
Yeah. Let's head on to Microprofile and tell you what Microprofile actually is. How many of you do know Java EE? Well, some more.
That's much more hands.
Yeah.
Good.
So easily put, Microprofile is Java EE for microservices. It's an initiative that came out a couple of years ago from lots of groups, as we'll see in a second. And it's a standard, so it's like there is no Microprofile implementation as such, but it's in the same way as Java EE. It's a standard that you can implement with TCK and all these things.
Yeah. So there is a lot of companies that are supporting that. So there is quite a big community. So you might recognize quite a few of the logos from before, and it's like it's big known companies that are behind that, and there are a little bit lesser known companies and even Java user groups. So this is London Java community there and stuff like that. So the community is pretty well established, and they support Microprofile in different ways. Some would create their own application servers, and some of them would be just supporting and spending time and fixing bugs and things like that. In addition to that, there is also a few implementations because Microprofile is a specification, so somebody needs to implement that as well. And the implementations that we have here, you have you can see it for yourself, right? You have quite a few of them. You have very known ones. You have Red Hat that has a few, Payara, and then you have Tommy Tribe that has Tommy EE server. IBM has the Open Liberty, and so on, so on. So you have actually quite a few of them out there. And the good thing is that you can actually switch. We'll show you that in a bit. But you can actually switch between application servers, and it works pretty much seamlessly out of the box. Where is... When you talk about microservices, the thing is that you usually want them be tiny, small. And you want them to be small footprint and very quick to start up. And, in this case, that's kind of... You always show it how big the jar files will be and how fast they will start. There is one missing there that is the kind of the newest kid, coolest kid, or whatever, kid in the town, but we'll show that one in a bit as well. As for now, you can see that it's pretty fast to start. I mean, it's just like speaking. I don't know. We're speaking about 2 to 7 seconds. That's pretty fast, and the footprint is also quite fine, quite okay.
Yeah, and we're not even showing the fastest one, which we'll come back to in a second, or like a couple of minutes. Like we got some demo issues. So. that's why Rustam is talking. I'm trying to fix things, but hopefully it will work in the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you on the right network? That might be easier.
Yep. But, yeah.
Okay, so this is always fun, doing IoT things. First, you bring a luggage full of cables and stuff, and you're kind of scared how that will look on the X-ray on an airport. And then you spend half an hour taping everything, and then you spend another time, well, hopefully not half an hour, making it up and run.
Yeah.
Okay, back to Microprofile. So Microprofile consists of a few building blocks, and those are most of those things you'll have seen before, and you know that. And then the thing is, though, is that you actually put them together to. In each version, there are things that will be changing. So there will be some of the things will be new. Some will be updated, and some of them don't have any changes. So this is Microprofile 2.2, and that is what has happened since version 2.1. And well, as you can see, there's not that many changes, and there are a few updated versions of that in upper left corner. And the thing is that what you can see here, it's actually that it means that it is about to stabilize, because in the beginning, like first the 1.0 versions and so on, were actually quite a lot of changes happening. There was a lot of new packages, there was a lot of new stuff coming in, the things were a bit unstable and so on. Now it's getting a bit more stable, so it's a bit more...
yeah, it's much more mature in a way, you can say. And what you also can see is that, well, there are certain things from Java EE that isn't here, right? In Java EE, you have things like JAX-B for XML parsing, or you have JMS for messaging, or lots of other things that typically usable. We've been using for many years, developing monoliths or even microservices in a non-container world, right? But with Microprofile, they've clearly taken the designers of the standard are clearly taking a stance that, okay, so these are the standards we want you to use. These are what we consider to be modern standards that you should utilize in front of. You should go for JSON and not XML. You should go for REST and not SOAP and so on. So there are quite some. If you do these things, it's easy, and if you do other things, it's hard. It's a bit the same ideas with a convention over configuration.
Yep. So let's look at the services. And the thing is with services is that we picked one, and then we'll look into it. There will be the same similar things that we will not mention for the other services because it's the same, right? But then we start with some basic stuff, and we'll get into a bit more and more advanced things at some point. So the lightning control service, that's basically the thing that controls the light, not the lightning, but, well, the light. It has some very basic things. It's not really very much advanced. So that's the one you see up there. And that's the one that will be talking to the tiny little bridge, this little white box you see on the table that will kind of relay all the messages back to the light. The first thing that's very obvious thing to mention is the...
dependency injection.
Yeah.
And it is it's kind of obvious, and it's works in exactly the same way as in Java EE. So you see the familiar application scope, inject. Those are the same annotations used as if you were using Java EE or Jakarta EE even. And yeah, it's used for lots of things in Microprofile internally as well. So it's very important, and it was one of the first standards implemented. In the first version of Microprofile, CDI was the first thing.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty obvious, so there is not that much to talk about that. But there are some other things that we can mention. Well, another obvious thing, another kind of thing you would expect in a microservice framework or specification to be there will be something that you can, well, let you talk JSON
and REST.
And REST. Well, again, a few lines of code, and that kind of it works.
Yeah, I think we might have to go for the plan B for the demo. So.
It's failing.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, if you I can try to reboot things here and see if it works. But then if you can take the gateway service, and then I can...
the gateway service, of course. The gateway service has the logic, and it's a bit more fun here, because that's where, logic, then you need stuff, pretty much. So that's the gateway service, which has the logic, and it does... in that one, we utilize the CDI and JAX-RS and JSON-B as well, just as we did in the Lightning control service, but also we use config. So we can see that, we do have some configurations. So in our case, it's like, what's the default color of the lamps? So that's, we inject using config properties. And these properties can be injected. So if you're using Kubernetes or OpenShift, you can do this with config maps. And they will come into here. Or it also can take system properties. So like from your OS environment. And you can also specify them in the application properties file. And if none of that hits, then you can, if you want, add a default value as well. So it works pretty fine. You can typically use this for things like URLs, certificates, passwords, not too sure, but like all these things that varies across your environment. So in your test environment or in your production environment, you can have the same Docker image that you push on, and what varies is you can inject into code using config properties. Yeah. Do we have something more to talk about?
I think we might get this thing. Yes, you need to click the button and we have this thing running, I think.
Inshallah.
Okay, the properties, that's one thing. The other thing is that you really want to, well, speaking of making things running, you want to check how things are when it comes to the health. So basically you want to check if the services are up and running or not. And this is also quite a well implemented and very nice, pretty much out of the box feature that is coming in with a bunch of output, and that output goes right into the kind of the cloud world we're living in now.
Yeah. Who are you using Kubernetes or anything that builds on Kubernetes, like Geeky, Azure, Kubernetes, anything? Okay, so a few of you using Kubernetes. So this one fits exactly good into Kubernetes health check, the liveness probe, the readiness probe. The health check from Microprofile is really suited for that. It's kind of made with that in mind. So this is what you get when it's up, and when it's down, you get another response, which you can perfectly fine configure yourself. So you can see that, okay, this is the outcome, that, okay, this service is down, it's not working, like the not so happy days. And you can see the output here, gateway not running properly. So this is the health check we have for our gateway service.
Yeah. And that message comes from that piece of code, which is, well, I mean, this is a very simple, overly simplified version of configuring things. You might want to do some more stuff. You want to actually check for things when you say it's up, or you want to check for things and define what is actually down, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can see that you can specify what message you want to send on. So initially we had printed the exception. Yeah, we did some try catch thing and got an exception and returned that, but you shouldn't do that. But things like this is okay.
Right.
Yeah, metrics. So you typically need metrics to see how are things going in production. Like how hard is my CPU utilized? How much memory free do I have? All these things, which you get totally out of the box using Microprofile. So you get metrics saying that. So without doing anything, you get metrics like how many threads I use, CPU, and so on. So you just go to the URL/metrics, and then you get lots of these metrics, which is in the same format as Prometheus produces. So if you're using Grafana or anything else to display your metrics, you can perfectly fine just plug the metrics from Microprofile into your Grafana, and it will work fine. But you can also specify your own metrics. So in our case, we have a metric for whenever we're changing the color of the lights. Then we have a counter saying we did that, and every time we try to change the light, this one increases. And you can also do things like timeout. Sorry, not timeout, timer. So that you can see, okay, this method call takes 20 minutes, hopefully not 20 minutes, but like 20 seconds or whatever. So you can get metrics of how fast your system is actually running. Yeah, and speaking of timeout, we have the issue with fault tolerance. Oh, might be up and running.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. So this demo is so much more fun when we are actually physical lights. We have a backup without the lights, but that's not that cool.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we have a demo until the end, so it's a good thing of having two people. So one debugs, the other one talks, and then
Yeah. And speaking of fault tolerance, it's also a part of Microprofile is fault tolerance, which gives you a lot of configuration properties. So here you can see that this is So here's at this URL, you can retry. Okay, so if it fails, you try again, and you can specify retry as many times as you can specify here. And it also has the concept of circuit breaker, like exactly the same way as a circuit breaker in your house. So if you're hammering on a service, like, okay, what's the weather, and then the weather service goes down because you're basically DDoSing yourself, then it's a functionality here that just checks every second, are you up now, and like stops all the rest of the calls so that you stop that DDoSing.
Because it's a very typical thing to happen when you have a bunch of services and things are kind of depending on talking to each other. You might want to think of the things like that, because if you don't get any answer, it will retry every so many seconds and ended up DDoSing yourself, your own network. And well, that you don't really want that to happen. So you want to kind of have plan B and C and so on, so you can actually fail over to things.
Yeah, and and that's one of the things we learned with microservices, right? You can't really rely on the network being up, so you have to take care of, okay, what do I do if the network goes down or a computer crashes or anything. Another thing you can do is say, okay, timeout. So if this method call takes more than 2 seconds, so that's milliseconds. So if it takes more than 2 seconds, then you get a timeout exception and you can carry on. And if even that fails, you have this concept of fallback. So we have this, okay, if we can't get contact with either the light service, the time service, so we can't neither get time nor can we get the weather, then we have a default light state that's like, okay, if we don't get light state from anywhere, then we go to default light state. And one thing that's important to mention here is that this get default light state method, you can see here as a plain string, so there's kind of some reflection magic going in the background here, is that method has to have the same signature as the one you're overloading. So get new state for light takes an int as an input, then the get default light state should also do that. If not, you get an strange error. So speaking of fun things, REST client is a part of Microprofile, because like when you are, well, we have two services. One is exposing REST, the other one should be doing a REST call to that client, to that service, sorry. Then we have a REST client, which is really, really nice to work with. Like the code gets really pretty, a bit like Wenkas was talking about earlier today. It's like it reads really fine, and it's easy to follow the flow. So what you do is that for an endpoint or our remote service, you in your client you create this interface, you add some magic annotations like the register REST client, and then you just split up the path and specify the endpoints basically. And in your code, you can inject it as a REST client, and then you can act like it's actually a plain Java class, so that remote service it's plain Java on your side, on the client side. But you need to add some magic. So the small text you see on the front here, you need to add that to your application properties. And that basically specifies, okay, what's the URL of this remote service. So it's like the packet name and some magic and then the URL. And this is really nice. It's type safe, reads fine, as long as it works. Because there be dragons. And by that we mean we had so much trouble with REST client like we've been doing this talk for, or like not this talk, but this project, like developing this software for about a year now. And we have spent so much of that time debugging and trying to figure out why doesn't the REST client function properly. And that there are different errors between different app servers. So if you're using Red Hat Thorntail implementation of Microprofile, then we get some issues with the REST client. If we're using IBM's Open Liberty implementation, then we get some other errors. And in the end, much of it turned out to be our fault because we did things wrong, but it wasn't easy to figure out. Okay, what did you do wrong? Oh, we forgot to add a column, a getter or a setter to the DTO object we're expecting back. So then we just get null and no sensible error message in any way. So it's like, yeah, anymore about that. But yeah, Microprofile is getting more and more mature. Like we had less of these errors for the previous few versions than we had when talking about Microprofile 1.1 and so on. And it's a quite young standard. Like Microprofile was launched 1.5, 2 years ago, and now it's getting to stabilize, but still there's a lot to do. And yeah, so it's kind of stabilizing, but we're also seeing some issues. Or on the documentation side, because Microprofile is a standard, and that's great because you can switch between app servers, and if you don't like the one you're using, you can switch to another one without touching a code at all. It's great in that way. But on the other hand, if when we're trying to figure out, okay, why isn't this working? Why isn't OpenAPI functioning properly in Thorntail? Then you might need to get exact documentation for OpenAPI in Thorntail, because that's using the Jagger implementation of OpenAPI. Oh, sorry, not OpenAPI, I mean OpenTracing. Sorry about that. OpenTracing. Like, you need the documentation for this combination of that technique, and that technique. If you're using Open Liberty, they are using Zipkin instead for OpenTracing, which is not. Then you need to configure things differently. So, I guess there will be some standardization on this coming up in the coming years. But as of now, you might need to do some diving into documentation. That's a bit why we created this project, just to show a way that things actually work in real software.
And I think I realized what's going on. The network, the whole Wi-Fi thing is down here. So no internet, no fun. So I guess we're waiting for the network to reboot, and there is nothing loading. I tried to use my phone. That one has almost no coverage. It's on edge now, so it doesn't really work. So, well, the moment we get Wi-Fi, I think that will get back to working.
Yeah. Luckily, we're not doing any cloud thing. Okay, so what are we doing in the time of weather service? Well, we're doing the same things with CDI, with JAX-RS, JSON config, but we're also using OpenAPI. Yeah, and that's these services, by the way. We all spoken about them, so let's head on. Okay, so this is OpenAPI. OpenAPI is really a specification of the APIs you're exposing. So, anyone of you using OpenAPI already? Swagger? Yes. So OpenAPI is like the standardized way of Swagger in a way. And what you do is that you add some annotations to your code, again CDI, and then they show up in the same format you can see here. And this is a format that you can plug into Swagger UI or any UI frontend, so that actually it's much more human readable than this. But this is what the raw version that is exposed. And this one you get pretty much for free. You just need to specify what's actually the text. So you see the summary in the middle here gets the current time, description, the format is wrapped zone date time. That's the only things you need to specify. The rest comes for free. Demo, we'll postpone this part a bit.
Well, I guess we'll postpone that part, unless somebody has a very good solution for getting internet somehow. Yeah, if you can. Okay, so somebody's sharing a hotspot. That's really nice. Hotspot. If you have a coverage, because mine was just edge and I couldn't do that. Okay.
Great. Then
we'll
head on to speak about. I'll head on to speak about things we learned while Rustam is trying to fix things. Thanks, by the way.
Bring your own internet. That's number one we learned.
BY. Yeah. Okay. So things we learned. one of the things we learned is that new cool things keep on coming. And by that we mean the app server that we like the most working with, we haven't spoken about at all. It wasn't present when we started. It came out a couple of months ago. It's called Quarkus from Red Hat. I know you know Quarkus already. Okay, so it's like it makes JavaScript seem slow. It starts in like a blink of a second and it's just really fast and really lightweight and like uses no memory at all. So it's a great tool. Oh, by the way, we are not sponsored by Red Hat or anyone, but we just had fun with it and liked it. So we showed that afterwards how fast the different services start, because we have implemented those 4 services at 3 different app servers, and they have both have some benefits and drawbacks. Another thing, cool thing that has come since then is that the Microprofile starter. So for those of you who are using Spring Boot, you might recognize that the same format with your. Okay, so you're going to start with your group ID, which version are you running, and which Microprofile implementation do you want? So do you want to run Payara or OpenLiberty? And do you want examples for doing health checks or open tracing or whatever? Then this gets you easily started. Because we tried to do things like manually from scratch, and that's much more work. So use the starter if you want to play with it. And you can find it on Google pretty easily. Yeah. Another thing we learned is that you probably won't need all the complexity you as an enterprise developer intuitively want to add. So we started with Lombok. Lombok generates lots of boilerplate code in Java for you. And it works quite fine. And then we had an issue before we were giving this talk at the previous conference where nothing was functioning. Nothing did work at all. We couldn't even compile our code. And we thought, oh, it's probably because of Lombok, because we had an idea. It turned out it wasn't, but every time you add complexity like this, you makes it harder for you to debug and understand why things aren't functioning. So we didn't need it, actually. You might need it in big projects, who knows. We also did some fun with adding logger and log4j and injecting that, and this fancy trick with doing CDI in order to be able to inject a logger in a class and so on. But well, we figured out that, okay, why do we do this? This adds lots of complexity. For some reason, it wasn't printing to one of our containers, to one of our services. So we figured out, okay, what the heck? Let's go for the easy version. So we're doing system out println instead, in a quite enterprisey way. So we made our printer that we can inject into the classes, just for decoupling and testability, just for fun actually. But, which is in the cloud native world, or if you're looking at things like 12-factor applications or cloud native, all these things, they say, okay, print your things to a standard console and then use Elasticsearch or some kind of tool to pick it up from there and handle it. So we did. Yeah, and we learned that app servers differ in the sense that there are, as we've been using different app servers, we've seen that they start up in different time. Some of them have problems with one specification in Microprofile, others don't, but they have problems on the other hand. And some app servers are really fast with new versions of Microprofile or new versions of Java, and some aren't. So there's a trade-off, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing, because it means that you can find an app server that's more tailored for your usage. While on the other hand, that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? But the good thing about Microprofile in this sense is that you only change your POM files, your configuration files, your Docker files. You aren't changing your Java code at all. We're switching, which you are actually done. We switched one of our services from Untitled to Quarkus. It took us I don't remember, 30 minutes, 1 hour, less than that. It was fully functioning. Yeah, small Y. Small Y is implementation of Microprofile. That's decoupled a bit from the app servers. That's just implementation of Microprofile. It's an initiative from Red Hat. It's probably mostly been developed and advocated and run by Red Hat folks until now. but IBM is starting to attach on as well. At least the rumors said. We haven't confirmed that, but it seems like it's getting a bit more traction. And currently, Red Hat has 2 implementations of Microprofile, or like 2 app servers supporting Microprofile, both Thorntail and Quarkus, and they're using the same implementation, which is cool. Yeah. So, are we up and running?
We might.
We might.
Just try to restart that thing and see.
You can just try to curl. This is always fun, right?
Yeah. How is it going? Maybe we need to turn on some lights.
No bridge found.
Well, it seems to be fine here.
Oh, we're in the wrong.
Well, okay. So yeah, well, I've been rebooting the network, so we might need to switch that. Okay.
Yeah, so we come back to that.
But go back to connect to the network and see if it works. Well, in the meantime, so we did quite a few techie, fun stuff. But some of those things has something to do with Microprofile, and some of them are just things that we had to do. So I think Mats mentioned a bit earlier that the API for this little thing, it's a kind of jar that you get from the manufacturer of those things, but then it's a long list of things you have to say yes to, and there is like legal terms and conditions and stuff like that you need to accept to get those running. And also, whenever you get that thing running, it's a tiny little link somewhere hidden, so you cannot do that thing over and over and over again. So we ended up like downloading it once and putting it on my machine in the local repository and running it from there. So you don't really have to have everything on npm out there in a central repository to make it run. Just so it's mentioned how to do it. We're not going to show it how. It's kind of just Google it. But it's a good thing to know that whenever you have your own artifacts, you can put it in a local repo and just keep it there instead of publishing it somewhere. Sometimes you just simply can't. In this case, you can't really do that.
Yeah. Yeah, so did you do the rant now that we had to, in order to get the SDK for those lamps, you had to register, you had to log in, you had to download it from somewhere, and you get a jar file that you get to.
So you basically had to sign off your firstborn and things like that. Sign it with your blood and things like that.
Yeah,
scary.
By the way, if anyone you want to program directly yourself against those lamps, they do provide a REST API directly. So use that. Don't use the SDK.
Yeah, that's much better. And actually, the cool thing is that with the REST client, you can use that REST API without thinking that much about it being REST or whatever. You can just say like object dot something, and it will do things for you automatically. That's you've seen a bit earlier. So I think we have actually our demo running, but maybe we should finish up the presentation and then do the demo. I guess that would be the best thing.
Yeah, and the next slide is really proper on that because you can see that, okay, so faking an API. In that sense, we mean, okay, so we are programming against those lights. But in some cases, there aren't internet, as we've just seen, or you are sitting on a plane or are traveling with just a computer. You don't want to bring your light bulbs with you in order to program against them, right?
You don't?
At least I don't.
I always bring my... No, I don't.
So what we did was that, okay, so the SDK was talking about, we have some code that's talking with that one, but we also have the fake ones that pretend to be a light bulb, so that you can program against it. And
so it's basically mocking, right? So that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
All right. What else?
Docker. Yeah.
Well, that's another thing that's not really worth mentioning. Everybody's doing that. So we did that too. Check.
Yeah. And this works.
It works really well, and you'll see that in a bit. And the only problem is that the solution we're using, the commercial thing that controls those lights, needs to have internet to work. And if it does not get the internet, it just refuses to boot, apparently. Well, that's what happened.
Yeah, as we just saw. So thanks to our hero of the day over here. No, it's working, so I think it's demo time.
All right.
So, should we
Let's go for the demo. So
let's go for demo. Okay, so we're just
kill
mirroring
that thing and then put the mirroring on.
Yeah, we're mirroring. Okay, so here we are. Okay. So, where should we start?
Maybe just make it full screen, I guess, or something.
Yeah. So we're starting with full screen?
Should we start with... Yeah, do reset lights or something.
Yeah. Okay.
So the point is, just so you know, the light in the middle is just doing any kind of shades of warm light. So anything from white to yellow, and that's it. Two on the side, they're actually colored light bulbs. Depending on the input you get, like a time or temperature or something, the color will change. And then we made it so it will be easier to see for you here in the room. So we made it so the colors will be changing quite a bit. Normally in the office, you might not want to do that. But, well, for the demo...
Yeah, for the demo, it's much easier to see when the light changes from like brightness of 10 to 200 than from 190 to 195, right?
Yeah, so the jumps are big and colors are quite big difference in colors and stuff.
Yeah, but
so
let's start with just, so we have this command called reset lights. So this is pretty cool. What we're about to do now is actually change the color of the lights with curling. So what that does is just reset the light's strength down to like close to nothing, as we can see now. But that's not that cool, right? That's not what we're here to see. So what's going to happen now is that we're going to do a call to our weather service and check the current weather and adjust the lights based on that. Oops. Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay.
yeah, I think they changed it a little bit, but not that much. Are we having, what's the log saying?
This was fun.
This is always fun. It actually worked really, really nicely just the day before.
Yeah.
I promise.
Oh, so if you just invoke the right URL, then we are. So now we can see that the color line changes, right? Whenever we do this again, you can see that the light switches color. Oh, sorry, not that much color, but brightness.
Brightness. So the brightness we put in is just to show you that things are actually happening. Normally you wouldn't have that. So there is a little bit of randomness basically in that function that would change the brightness a bit for each call because the brightness outside, the sun and everything is not changing that fast while we're talking. And we just needed something to show off.
Yeah. Okay, so where's pointer?
The pointer is, yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, so what's going on behind the scenes here? This is the gateway that says the logic. So that says, okay, so we are weather endpoint. Yeah, and what we get back is the temperature, which is 15 degrees. So we can see that we converted that into this light state with brightness of 186. And the input source is the weather, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, well, yes, so all of those services are running in a Docker container. So maybe we should show those as well.
One,
yeah, here it is. So this is the 3 Docker containers that we have. And then you can see on the left side there, you can actually see which container it is. So Facade, that's the one that kind of receives all the things, so gateway. And then you have weathers, not the gateway, but it's like, it's the one that talks to the lights. I'm sorry. And then you have the weather service and time service and so on. Yeah. And the cool thing is, maybe we should try to reboot that and see
what could possibly go wrong, right?
Yeah, what can possibly go wrong? Now we got actually lights working. So
we're saying Docker compose up, and what you should watch now is the logs, and see with the services on the left side.
Yeah, see which one starts first, because like time service is kind of. So the thing on top is the warnings, right? And now we have time service that is done booting.
Yeah, this one's finished booting right here.
Yeah.
4509.
And then the other ones actually start logging. So it's actually quite fun because the thing is, all of them are running in different application service. And, well, you can guess which one, time service is running on Quarkus. So it starts actually before even the other ones are starting to log anything, just starting to boot. And it's quite amazing to see the speed. We were not really expecting that to happen. And it was like, wow, that was pretty cool. Yeah. So we have another weather service is running on Wildflat Swarm, and then we also have one running on Open Liberty, I think, right?
Yeah, the gateways, the logic is running on Open Liberty.
Yeah. Maybe we should try to switch application service? That might be interesting.
That might be fun. Okay, so we do have, for the weather service, we do have an implementation. Okay, so let's look into that weather service. You can see here we have, okay, is this big enough for you to see?
Can you see the thing in the bottom there?
So in the bottom here you can see cumulus pum.
Press enter a couple of times so it gets a bit higher up.
Okay, yeah, sure. So here we got cumulus pum and pum XML. So the pum XML is the default one that's implement the pum file for the Thorntail implementation. But the cumulus pum, that's cumulus EE, one of the other app servers that hasn't got that much traction, but we actually like it. So what we can say is that we can use the cumulus pum. Oh, yeah, we have like 4.5 minutes. Should go. Okay. So now we're specifying that, okay, the one you recently saw that was using Thorntail, but now we're switching to Cumulus. So it builds in 6 seconds. And now we start Docker Compose again. We need to rebuild it, I think. Yeah, so while that builds, we can build it in the background where we talk a bit more, perhaps.
So basically what happened is that we...
oh, crap. Okay.
Hey, hello.
Oops.
So basically what happened is that we switched the application servers without changing any code. You just change the POM file and change a bit of setup, and it should be up and running really nicely.
Yeah, you might also need to change your Docker files, or your Docker Compose file, which is what we did here.
Yeah. All right, now it seems to be running. So let's go back and do the rest of the slides.
Oh, no, we're starting. Yeah.
It's starting. Okay.
Now you can see that the weather service is starting. Now it's the Cumulus version.
Yep.
So we switch app server. We don't changing Docker file and changing used another POM file, and the Java code is exactly the same. And maybe we can just try it as well, just for fun. This is not, I guess it's gonna work, I think.
Waiting for bridge.
Waiting for
need
bridge,
to press the button.
So we just press this button over here. No, that's just...
This is a security thing, yeah.
Yeah. There we are. Got new temperature. So we're from Norway, so we're using temperature from Norway because it feels like being back home, right? Yeah. So now we switch app servers. The new one's up and running, totally functioning. Okay, so this light is a bit strong, perhaps, so we'll just reset it before we finish up. There we are.
Nice. Okay, we have very, very few slides left, so let's go back to that, and
yeah,
it should be somewhere there in the back.
Should be somewhere. Yeah, yeah, Docker Compose, we just told you. So this was what we have done already. So we're going to talk a bit about future work, because we aren't, as developers, we are never happy, right? We're never finished, we're never done with anything. So, well, of course, this is just the one we showed you in the beginning. What are the different parts of Microprofile? You can recognize that we have been speaking briefly about many of these, but there are two we haven't spoken about, open tracing, so that you can trace a call from the gateway through the weather service and then to the facade, so you can see which parts of the call that took time and so on.
And then you want to be able to track, because that's another thing with microservices, is that you really want to see how your calls are going on, and when it fails, you really want to know where it happened. So what happened like now was I was debugging through the whole thing and actually trying to see where it stops until I found out that the internet was down. So the thing is that with open tracing, you will be able to see actually how much time each call takes and what services are actually failing, which would be a really, really nice thing to have, for example, in this case. And this is also another very typical thing that you really want to do if you're doing microservices.
Yeah.
Another thing, well, you want to put some security, right? Because
right now, if you are connected to our network, you can just go straight into the facade and call to the light bulbs, because we haven't secured that connection in a way.
Yeah, so we just have a secured Wi-Fi network, and the rest is not secured at all. But then you can integrate this thing with AWT, so then you can ask for credentials from some kind of other authentication provider. Yeah. It could be Azure AD, or it could be anything, Active Directory. It could be anything really, and then you will be able to put that quite seamlessly on top of your services, which would be a very, very nice thing to do as well.
Yeah, and what's cool about this is that in the same way as much of what we've been talking about, this in itself is not that like spectacular or new thing or fancy or anything. It's just Microprofile isn't a way. It's a collection of like boring, useful things you typically need for your services, and that's like, so it's not exciting in itself. It's just practical. It gets you started and gets you focused on what you're really going to do, your business logic.
And most of the cases also very easy to implement. So it's very easy to get it working. But like, yeah, like you said, most of the things we mentioned is kind of obvious things, but they're just put it together in one toolbox to help you to go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Microprofile is still under development, so the version 3 is the next one. In version 3, there are going to be some minor upgrades on some upgrades on metrics and health checks. And there's also this Microprofile umbrella thing, which I haven't spoken about. But for reactive programming, there's reactive streams is already part of like the Microprofile platform, or what to say. It's not part of the Microprofile specification as such, but it's like the same under the same umbrella. And there's discussions going on concurrency, GraphQL, and so on for 3.0. But it's a bit, well, they don't really know what's going to come in 3.0. Like what's done and good enough will be part of it. Yeah, another thing we want to do, okay, put all the services into Kubernetes, or maybe even OpenShift, because that's cool, and we have good experiences with it from other projects.
Yeah, so the whole point with the whole project, it's worth mentioning again, it was just to play around with things, to try things, and to see what works, what doesn't work. And this is kind of where we are now. Okay, we have it running on our Docker Compose file locally on the machine, but now it will be fun to put it on some kind of cloud or somewhere and make it run there in some way, right?
Yeah, and Istio, another cool thing I want to play around with.
Well, that will be also a thing that we would really like to have a look on, but that will be coming later, and we're running out of time, I guess. So
yeah, so everything we've been talking about so far is available, open source. Do whatever you want with it. Even contribute if you want. We would appreciate that.
We would love some pull requests if you have anything, if you want to fix anything, to add new features, be our guests.
Or complain about anything. That's also fine.
Yeah, that's also fine.
Yeah, but on GitHub on this URL,
issues.
So you can like look into our code and see all our crappy code and what we've done so far. And if you find that okay, Microprofile is interesting, I need to learn more, then the official webpage microprofile.io is quite good. It's getting better and better, actually. That's maybe the one thing that has improved the most during the last year, the web page.
Yeah, it's the web page and the starter thing, because starter thing was really amazing. Back in the days when we started this project, it was a bit more cumbersome to get started with new projects. But there you can just click, and that's it. Yeah. That's kind of the similar thing that you have with Spring Boot applications, right? Where you go and click and everything works, and that's...
yeah. But you can do it for yourself as well. That's what we do with Quarkus. We just download the starter pack for Quarkus and just copy and paste from the POM file and put it all in there with the existing code, and it worked. So we can do that, but use the starter. It's better.
Well, that is pretty much it, what we have. I mean, we'll be happy to talk to you a bit more about that afterwards. If you want to get hold of us, that's us on Twitter. And also... sorry again for a live debugging session as well. I mean, that wasn't really planned, but, well, it kind of worked out at the end, but took a bit of running back and forth. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.